So let me go ahead and introduce Lynn, my co-host, who will then introduce Karen. I just want to spend a moment about Lynn because those of you who don't know her, I hope that you someday get to know her. She is an amazing, amazing woman. She co-founded the TurkNet Leadership Group with her husband, Bob, back in 1987. And she's currently serves as the co-chairman of the TurkNet Leadership Group. And along with Bob, she co-authored the book, Decent People, Decent Company, How to Lead with Character at Work and at Life. And so as a result of that book, the leadership character model, which was developed by Lynn and Bob, is a major part of our DNA. And we try to spread the word, spread the gospel of character and how important that is to successful leadership as far and wide as we can. But what I found absolutely incredible about Lynn is her work with organizations and teams and how she can quickly discern what it is that an organization or team needs and their struggles to succeed. So she gets to the bottom line so quickly. And she's passionate about helping leaders at all levels and teams and organizations to be able to fulfill their purpose and their potential. So it's always a privilege to sit with Lynn, but especially today. I think it's going to be very interesting to listen in on this conversation between Lynn and another very highly accomplished woman. So thank you for Lynn for agreeing to co-host today. And so I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks for that introduction. I love that. Character is part of our DNA. And I could not be more excited than to be here with Karen Robinson. She is somebody I have admired for a long time, and it's just super fun to be here. One of the hardest things when you're doing an introduction for somebody like Karen is figuring out what of all the things you could say, you do say. You will see the screen behind her says ONJEV. I just realized this morning that that is from longevity, and ONJEV is the company that Karen serves as chair of the board for right now. She has done amazing things over the years, though. She began her career in large corporations, but she is known in this city as a serial entrepreneur. She has been the CEO of 4 venture or angel-backed companies. And one of the things that's most amazing about her is her ability to get investment dollars. Susan Hitchcock did a profile on Karen, probably it's close to 20 years ago now. But one of the things she wrote was, Karen brought to the table an ability to get investors to buy in to what she wanted to accomplish. I have seen that over and over again. She's gotten over 75 million in investment, and she's one of the few people to do that, much less women to do that. She's won a lot of awards, including Women in Technology's Woman of the Year in 2000, and she won our Leadership Character Award in the Inspirator category in 2012. Karen is known as a giver of time and of money, and one of the places she spends much of her energy is in micro lending, especially in Africa and Central America, and particularly to women. In her leadership character nomination, the dear Chris St. Clair had evidently been to Guatemala with Karen at a women's summit where Karen was the keynoter. And Chris wrote, her message and speech could have easily been focused on her triumphs and successes, but rather she shared her shortcomings and her mistakes. For that audience, that was impactful in a way that can't be measured. I think for all of us who know Karen, one of the things that has been most amazing about her is that transparency and honesty. The other thing that I have seen with Karen is her incredible, amazing ability to influence. I have personally witnessed why she gets those investment dollars. I remember a few years ago sitting with her in a booth somewhere in Northeast Atlanta, somewhere, the metro area. And I was picking her brain, as most of us do, and she was being very generous. But I remember her turning her iPad around and she started talking about her company. And I remember personally getting more and more excited myself. And I was thinking, she is amazing. I would buy anything from her. And I could feel then why investors invest. So Karen, I'd like to start our dialogue with that. Can you just take us back, maybe to the 90s when you were leading I know you were in battery technology at that time. What was the story you told investors then? Just tell us a little about
Well,
that.
first off, Lynn, I am honored to be interviewed by you. As you know, you've been one of my mentors. You've been one of my sheroes. When I first met some of your team members, and they told me about you and Bob, and I've been just fallen in love with you, the both of you, for so many years. So thank you for bringing me on board today. Thank you for letting me be associated with this wonderful group, and thank you for the time. And thank you. It was so great to see a lot of the chat from some of my old friends and some of my old employees. So thanks so much, folks. I really appreciate you being here with me. So thank you for that question. And interesting, let me tell you a little about the story. So I was the youngest vice president of sales for National Data Corporation, which is a company that many of you don't even know who it is because it was sold many years ago. But it used to be one of the big powerhouses for fintech. And I was the youngest divisional sales manager, sales VP. And one of my mentors there, and you'll hear me throughout the conversation today talk about my mentors, because again, the reason I give back to so many of you, or so many, especially young men and women, is because so much has been invested in me from people like Lynn and Bob. And the president at the time of NDC was Mark Bronstein. And Mark Bronstein, he and I got to go know each other. We did some sales calls together. It was a really heady, fast growing time. And Mark said, Karen, I think that you should be a CEO. And at that point in the early 90s, there were very few women CEOs. And he said, the right way to do that is to become an entrepreneur. And I had to go look up the word, because that was before we all knew what an entrepreneur was. Looked it up and said, yeah, I think I want to do that. So anyway, shortly thereafter, he said, I've got a company. Why don't you, I'd love to hire you as our head of sales. And I said, okay, what does it do? And he said, battery charging. I said, okay, don't really know about battery charging, but sure. So I said, I tell you what, Mark, I've been very blessed. I'm a head of sales for a telecom technology company. I'm making more money than any, late 20-year-old should be making. So I'll tell you what, you don't have to pay me. Just give me a big piece of equity. And at the same time, I want to get a big commission for every sale I make. And Mark's thinking, this is the best deal of all. I get this high-powered woman and I don't have to pay her anything. What a great deal. So I came over, I quit my job, I went over, and literally about 2 weeks later, I came back to him and I said, Mark, I'm not gonna take this job. I'll never make a dime. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the CEO doesn't know what he's doing. The company doesn't know what they're doing. There's no clear value proposition. And because I'm only commissioned, I really can't take this job. So good luck. And if I were you, I wouldn't put any more money in the company. And remember, Mark was the president at that time, was a Fortune 100 company. And he laughed and said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Karen, but thank you for your advice. Good luck. I get a call about 2 weeks later, and he and the board was, the governor of South Carolina was on the board, a really high-powered board. Got a call about 2 weeks later, and he said, Karen, we fired the CEO. Would you come be the CEO? And that was my first experience as a CEO of a fast growth, very, very early stage company. So the next question became, Mark said, is Karen, you need to go raise money. And again, I had sold a lot, but I'd never actually raised money for a company before. So I started knocking on doors. And what we found out, which is very interesting, and there's a lesson in here for all of us, regardless of the industry you're in. what I found out is most people in the early 90s that were selling technology were all talking about the bits and the bytes and the technology and how it works. Customers don't care about how it works. What they care about is how you solve their problem. And so very quickly, we pivoted and we talked about how this company could in fact help you charge a battery faster. And it's well known, that company I raised about $40 million for. And it became very clear that how we did it is we literally had a cell phone. This is how simple it was. We had a cell phone, we drained it down. We had a big stopwatch that had 5 minutes on it. We showed everybody it was dead because back in those days, they had the little bars on the phone that told you it was dead. We literally was dead. We charged it up in less than 5 minutes to full. We then got on a phone call and people touched the battery. And their 4 facts were batteries die quickly, it's expensive and ruins the battery to charge it quickly. If you can charge it quickly and it's cold, the battery's cold to the touch, then how valuable would that be? And on that little 4 pitch, if you will, 4 statement pitch, we raised a lot of money. We got customers like Motorola. We got some of the biggest lead acid batteries. And I think the lesson I learned there, which I think is so valuable for all of us, is most people, when you talk to them, that they don't really care about me and what I'm doing. They care about them. And if you can really cater your message to them, it's amazing how far you'll go. Again, investors, it's a well-known joke in the 90s in Atlanta that Karen runs a battery company and doesn't know the difference between voltage and current, which is, how can you sell a battery company when you don't know the voltage and current? But the story of that was people don't care about voltage and current. They care about solutions. It was a great lesson for me early on in my entrepreneurial career.
That is so, I learned more than I had known before from that answer. It still amazes me. One of the reasons I think this story and what Karen does is so important for all of us, there's a quote I heard probably 20 years ago that I love, that influenced me. And it's people, there are only 2 kinds of people in the world. People who know they're in sales and people who don't. We are all in sales. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's talking about hiring and saying that when people are in an interview, they're selling. And I think we can all learn. I have learned from Karen, and that's a fabulous advice. People want to know what's in it for them, not what the bits and bytes are. Karen, I want to now go back to the beginning. I know that you were born in a somewhat famous place, Roswell, New Mexico.
My parents, let me just jump in real quickly. When my husband and I got married 24 years ago, my husband was talking to my parents and he said, well, where's Karen from? And where's Karen's born? And my parents did not say I was born. They said, she's from Roswell, New Mexico. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but yes, I'm from Roswell, New Mexico.
And you had a somewhat adventurous childhood, I know, and some of that may have rubbed off on you. So tell us a little bit about that childhood.
Thank you. Let me just take you just back a number of years. My mother and father were both from Arkansas, and Arkansas in the 50s and 60s was quite a rural area. And my parents literally had never been out of Arkansas other than a couple family vacations. My father, when they got married, my father got the opportunity to go to a place, and some of you won't even remember this, a place called Formosa. It's now called Taiwan, but back in the mid 60s, when I was just a very, very, very young child, my parents had the opportunity to go to Formosa. And my mom had to look it up on the map, but my mom packed her bags, and me and my older brother and my younger sister went across the world. When most people, again, I love all the people talking about travel, but back then the travel you did was maybe you'd go to California, you'd go to New York, but you would never go out of the country, maybe Europe. And my parents took me around the world, and we went to Taiwan, and my father worked for the Litton Industries, which was one of the first multinational corporations, and he worked with the Taiwanese government. It was a wonderful experience for 2 reasons. Number one, it really took you out of your comfort zone. So for the first time, even as a young child, I had to learn. I mean, many places we'd be the only one that was, blonde hair. The only person in many cases in a village we'd go to, the only one they'd ever seen that had blonde hair. Learned so many new things. But one of the things my parents did was so fun. And for those of you who lived overseas with your families in the 60s and 70s, typically your company would give you typically business class tickets to come home every summer because they knew it's a little bit of a challenge to live overseas. So every year my parents would turn in their business class tickets, and we would the family together would pick a place we wanted to go. So we were in Russia in the mid 70s when it was just opened. I remember losing a contact of mine in Goons department store. Those of you who've been to Russia know, to Moscow know that that's a well-known department store. I literally was looking for my contact lens when I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old. We went to Kashmir, which now you can't even go to Kashmir. We went to Kashmir in northern India and literally rode horses up in the mountains. Unbelievable experience. But it was so great because, but by the way, that was before the internet. So literally we would go to an airport and we'd go look at those big travel boards and figure out what hotel we're going to stay in for the night. And my mom and dad had 3 kids under the age of 8. What a great experience. And it taught me 2 things that I think are so valuable. One of them is, again, get used to getting out of your comfort zone. And we don't have to go over to Kashmir to do that. You can do that here in Atlanta. You can do it in your communities. Let's figure out ways to get out of our comfort zone and really start to understand what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. The other thing that was so great was my parents really taught to live in the moment. I could never, and now this is so foreign, I'm sure, to most of you, because when we book a travel, you've got the internet and you've got Airbnb and you've got so many options that your whole trip in advance. And I remember once we went to Delhi and we landed at the airport in the middle of the night, and it was just, the sounds and the smells and the excitement at 2 a.m. was something I'd never seen. My parents, we landed and we found a hotel and we trudged over there. What a great experience. So that, again, the comment I would make is really get out of your comfort zone. It's so healthy for you, and really embrace the moment where you're at. So many times when I can still vividly remember things like drinking from that very fresh stream in the mountains of Nepal, in Kashmir. What an amazing experience. And I'll never forget those. And so if you have children, I encourage you to do that with your children. If you don't have children, take the time yourself to do that, because those are the moments that I really remember.
That story just blows my mind, and especially the idea of turning in the business class tickets and
it's great.
Just taking the plunge, being there and not knowing what's next. Well, something you had said before is the life you led meant that you went to a lot of different schools. And I remember you're talking about sort of assessing yourself when you moved. Do you remember that?
I do. Thank you, Lynn. That's a great comment. And one of the things we did is, again, I went through a number of different schools when I was in elementary school, junior high, high school, and so forth. And about every couple of years we'd move. And so some people would really be concerned about that, because they're like, wow, I have all these friends and now I've got to go somewhere different and meet new people. How do I feel about that? I looked at it a little differently. I thought it was a way to kind of reinvent myself. So every time we moved, I thought, what did I do really well? What was I respected for? What could I have done a little bit better? And I got to tell you that literally gave me an opportunity to kind of reimagine what Karen was, who Karen was, and give me a chance to rethink that. I remember and typically we wouldn't move in the 5th grade, we'd move in the 2nd grade and the 8th grade. So all some different times that are not typical when everybody else is coming in new. So most of the time, me and my brother and sister would go into a schooling system where everybody else had already been there for a year or 2. And I'll remember, never forget this, but I went to a new school halfway through my sophomore year in high school. It was a big school. I'd never been to a school this big. It was a 3-grade school and there was 2,500 kids. It was a big school. And I remember that going in, had a real chance to think about who do I want to be when I graduate. So I was fortunate enough in my junior year, I became junior class president. Senior year, student body president, again, I think the first female student body president. At the same time, they became homecoming queen. It was just a great experience because, again, I don't think I would have been that outgoing. I don't think I would have been that, the new Karen, if you will, as if I had stayed in the same school. So it was a great opportunity every couple of years to kind of reinvent myself, which is another thing. You don't necessarily have to move to a different country. But I think that there is tremendous value in continuing having a process where you're thinking about who you are, thinking about what you like about who you are, and at the same time thinking, you know what, I don't really like that part of me. What can I do to maybe make myself a better sense of who I am? So again, another great thing that I am so thankful to my parents that they provided me with those opportunities.
Yeah, I love that story. And that whole idea of sort of becoming your best self and carrying that forward throughout your life. Because I think many of us don't learn that kind of self-reflection and growth, perhaps ever. It's hard.
It's hard. It is hard.
And it's so impressive to think about
Thank
you're
you.
doing it
Thank you.
so early, so early. Tell us a little bit more about who Karen was. And like, I can see that you were obviously, if you were student body president, and if you were homecoming queen, you were pretty involved by the time you were in high school. What would your friends say about you in high school?
So two things. My father said this to me, and this is the reason I brought up the homecoming thing part. When I was, I was up against all the traditional, the cheerleaders and the song leaders and so forth, and it was me. And I remember my father said to me when he escorted me down, he said, Karen, here's the thing I'm so proud of. I may get tears. My father passed away about 7 years ago, and he's been such an important part of my life. But I remember when my father escorted me down on the homecoming court, he said, Karen, I'm so proud of you because your friend group is so many, whether it was the druggies, whether it was the popular, whether it was the bookworms, whether it was the minorities, whoever it was, he said, they're all so happy for you. And that was a great lesson for me too, because I realized it's easy to get in your little group. But when you really branch out and start to make friends of, all different walks of life and so forth, what a rich experience. And that's the only reason I brought that up is because it was important for me to say, wow, the impact, the relationships I've had with so many people outside of my group is what has made me who I am. The other thing and I've spoken quite to many, many women's groups, as you know, Lynn, and I've been on panels together for many, many years. And one of the things that I have been so adamant for, especially for those of you that are mothers and fathers, get your girls into sports. And I love sports for a number of reasons. We didn't have the variety of sports when I was growing up, but we did have track and field. And I remember, the two things I remember of that is, number one, sports are so good because it teaches you to win, teaches you to lose, and it teaches you to work hard. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is all about. You're going to win some and you're going to lose some. But that upbringing of being involved in a team, building each other up, being part of a team that wins and loses is so valuable. And that I've gone back to that lesson again and again. Now, so many girls are in sports, but again, when I was doing it, it was a very small group of girls that were involved in sports. And I just encourage you all, mothers or fathers, if you mentor younger kids, if you have children, encourage them to try out. And be part of the sports community. It's just such a great experience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. There's people that have said that girls, because we don't often play team sports,
right,
we don't learn to lose.
We don't learn to lose.
And it's important to be able to do that, to take the risk of being in a position where you might lose and being able to come back from that. Absolutely. I feel like that has kind of probably, having parents like yours probably helped you with the risk-taking I see in you, but certainly sports makes a difference.
Well, the other thing I'll say about that, Lynn, and again, the reason I picked track and field, and I typically did the 200, 400, 800 races. And those of you who have been involved in track and field know those are the folks that don't have talent. The sprinters have a lot of talent and the long distance runners have a lot of talent. If you're a 400-yard racer, it's all about tenacity and drive, and practice. And so again, I didn't have my brother and sister have significantly more talent, raw talent. They're smarter than I am. But what I had was I just got in there and worked. I showed up, I was present every day. I didn't miss practice. And again, I got to be very, very competitive, even at the state level, because nobody worked harder than me. And I think that's the other thing, that we all don't have tremendous blessings, or we all don't have innate skills, but all of us can get in there and be present every day and work like your life depended on it. And again, from that, it was what a great lesson for me, that again, I was not the fastest, but after training every single day for years, I became one of the fastest. But it was all because of that hard work and showing up every day.
That's pretty amazing. And I guess it's Gladwell who wrote the book about 10,000 hours of practice.
Yes.
I think we're learning how capable we actually are. The idea of a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. It's not that you're born with something. If you have the right tenacity and willingness to put in the time, you can create a lot of expertise in yourself that you might not have done. That's a fabulous story. Well, I want to move on now to your early career. And you've talked a little bit about Mark, who I know was Bronstein, who I know was an early role model. Tell us about, what happened after you got out of college? Where'd you go first, and what did you?
Well, I got out of college, and then I'm embarrassed here because I'm going to show a little bit of my age, but I got out of college in the early 80s when there weren't a lot of jobs. So all my friends had these wonderful jobs in consulting and accounting and you name it. And only job I could find was in a fast growth program, a high growth program at one of the big retailers out on the West Coast. And so I joined the company and was part of their management training program. It was a big retailer. And I ended up, by the way, first thing, a big aha moment. I always thought retail was about design and, more the soft skills. And I don't have a lot of those soft skills, but I found out it was all about numbers. And so if you really knew, again, going back to working hard and being present, if you knew your numbers, you could be very successful in retail, even if you had no clue what outfit to wear or what the right, the design and the look and feel looks like. And so I was promoted a couple times. Quick sidebar, funny story. The typical path was you do your assistant department manager, then your assistant buyer, then you come back to the store for like a group manager, and then you go back to as a buyer. And at the time I said, I don't want to do buying. I want to be with people. So I don't want to do the buying side. They said, well, that's the only career path. And I said, I don't think that's right. If that's it, then this is probably not the right career. And so they made a position for me. So I went from assistant manager to sales manager, divisional sales manager. So I actually had 150 employees when I was like 24 years old. And most of them, I was the youngest by far, other than the temp workers. And I was managing people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, which by the way is not old because those are the ages I'm at now. But at the time I was just, again, wow, how can I lead a 60-year-old? I don't know anything. And it was a great experience. I was, again, the youngest divisional sales manager in May Company's history. And again, the same sort of thing I learned. It's not about me, it's about them. I know that, Lynn, you've talked about servant leadership for so many years. And I remember that it was truly about what makes them tick, what makes them successful. And if you give them, I kind of think about it and I'm not a good bowler, but I think about it like bowling. Especially when you're a kid and you've got those lanes, what are those lanes on the side of the bowling, that keep the rails, I guess they're called, and, or the bumpers. And I remember thinking kind of the same thing. My job as a leader, I could not impart a lot of wisdom to someone who'd been in retail for 30 years. But what I could do is give them honest feedback. What I could do is encourage them. What I could do is understand what's important to them. And as long as they were in those guardrails, we were going to be successful. And so it was a terrific opportunity, a great learning experience for me, a lot of responsibility early on. But I quickly learned, and for those of you on retail, I do apologize, but retail back then was a lot of long hours, a lot of Christmases, or day after Christmas, and not a lot of pay. And so shortly thereafter, I was recruited by AT&T to be one of their divisional sales managers. So again, at this point, I was probably mid-20s, and great opportunity. The great thing about big companies, and I know, Lynn, you and I have talked about this, the great thing about big companies is they have, especially back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they had the best training programs. You could come in and you'd learn so much, you'd get so many fundamental skills. And that prepared me. So when I think about the things that prepared me as an entrepreneur, that was such a great preparation for me, because as an entrepreneur, I could have never afforded to pay for that kind of training, but I got it so much, and it really prepared me. Also, as I said, I took risk, which was very influential, helped me really get ahead. So when I went to work for an NBC, when I was recruited to be one of their youngest, I think maybe their youngest VP, again, I had brought so much experience, and even though I was only, late 20s, early 30s, I felt like my brain was a 50-year-old because I had learned so much from so many people. Great experience.
That's amazing, incredible. Tell us a little bit more about your early. I know you've talked before about failures, about things that have gone wrong. Just tell us a little bit about an early disappointment and how you figured out how to.
Great question. And as I said, the other thing I love about sports, and I'll go back to that for a second, I've said that before, but you learn how to lose. Now it's very vogue to talk about fail fast. But
right.
Back when I became a CEO, you never, not even on the West Coast, you didn't talk about failure. And one of the early experiences, I was CEO, and we were getting ready to do a public offering. It was going to be a very, very large public offering. And one of my all-white male board, which I'm embarrassed to tell you, my all-white male board told me, Karen, you've done a great job. You've got customers, you've got revenue. We really think we need to bring in a appropriate person that will be probably better on the street. So we're going to go get a experienced public company CEO. Are you okay with that? Well, at first I said, no, I'm not sure. But after a time, I said, you're right. I've kind of been here for 5-6 years. I'm not quite sure I want to, I'm not sure I want to retire here. You're right. It's probably appropriate to do that. And I've got to tell you that we brought in a big company guy, and it was a disaster. But what I learned from that was two things. Number one, and I encourage in particular women who are in our audience, sometimes we always have that imposter syndrome, like people are going to find us out. And I'm thinking, these are all old white guys that are, and apologize, anybody on the call that's a white man that's a little older. But I thought they must know more than I do. They've all had successes. And you know what? They didn't know more than me. I knew more about this. This was my baby. Every investor I brought in, every customer my team had brought in, every result has been because of the team we had assembled. And when they came in, I thought, oh, well, we'll make a lot of money. Not a big deal. And I should have right then and there thought, and I should have said, no, you can fire me, but I'm not stepping down. Shame on me. And I encourage any of you who are in that situation, dig deep and don't take conventional wisdom. Don't take, if there's a bunch of folks that say you should do it this way, if you don't feel it's right, then say no. And the problem was, sure enough, this was right before the crash of 2001. And there was almost every IPO literally froze. So there were no IPOs for probably almost a year. And in that time, again, I had been promoted to chairman, and the CEO we hired just didn't really have, he just wasn't an entrepreneurial, scrappy startup kind of guy. So it was just a bad situation. Anyway, when I think back about it, I think A, I should have stood up. B, I should have made them fire me, which if it came right down to it, they may or may not have, I don't know. But when I think about it, the company ended up being sold for a small amount of what, the market cap, the company was multi-billion, and we sold it for significantly less than that. And I remember after that time kind of thinking through, and that's when I first came up with this process to deal with failure. One of the first things I didn't like about it is literally the front page of either the Journal-Constitution or the Business Chronicle. One of them said, Karen embraces failure. Now, again, you might want that today, but you definitely didn't want it 20 years ago or 30 years ago because nobody was talking about failure. But that's what it was. I learned to live with it. But what I did then is came up with a process that I've used every other time that I've had a setback. One is it's similar to a grieving process. The first thing is you allow yourself to grieve. You know, I was feeling I put so much into this company, and there were such big aspirations for this company that I had to take some period of time and just think, you know what, this hurts, and acknowledge the hurt. The second thing I need to do is do a real assessment. Okay, what is my accountability? What is my responsibility? Here's the things that I did that I screwed up on. I should have done this. Okay, what am I going to do different? But in addition, there were things that were out of my control. I could not have impacted the crash of March of 2001. So no matter how good I was, that was a reality. So not going to beat myself up about that. That's life, and you learn from that. So, and then the third piece of this whole failure process is going back and saying, okay, get back on the horse, get back in the saddle, get back in the game, whatever it takes. Give yourself a little bit of grief, think about it, learn from it, and then get right back out there. And so I ended up, and I think is maybe one of your other questions, Lynn, but I quickly after this process, my husband and I had been married a couple of years at this point. We wanted to have a baby. I was getting a little older. And I realized I didn't want to raise a lot of money because at that point, women, you know, if you were a venture-backed company, they didn't really, it wasn't, I'm just trying to be careful how I say this. There were not a lot of women who were mothers who were open about it. And I waited so long to have a baby that I really wanted to enjoy it. So I literally picked a company. I was recruited to a company that didn't have to raise a lot of money. It was something, I didn't have to invent anything. It was a sales and marketing play. I could take my daughter to work. Excuse me. My daughter literally, she turned 19, by the way. My daughter literally grew up with the nanny in the office. She learned to walk at the office. She, I think, grew up and thought that all children had corner offices because that's where she had her nursery and everything was in the corner office. What a great experience. And we ended up, took the company up in about 4 years, sold it to a Canadian public company. It was a great win. Everybody had a huge return on it. But it was a terrific experience to be able to meld both my private, which is my family, and my business life.
Right. Go ahead and drink something. That to me is one of the stories. People are talking now about not balancing work and personal life, but integrating. And you clearly did that there, right? I mean, you sort of invented it at that point.
It was way before anybody else was doing it, that's for sure. But in
What's
fact,
that?
it was way before any other women were doing that. And I must tell you that that was interesting because most women that had children were pretty silent about it when they had their conversation with venture capitalists, because most of the venture capitalists were men. And only in the last 10 years have they become much more open about it because most of them have very successful daughters. So you find that when their children start to get out there, excuse me.
I want to tell you all that Karen and her mother, who is 87, had their second COVID shot late in the day, 2 days ago. Now, I've had the second COVID shot, and it sort of took me out for a day. Karen, I just want to congratulate you again on being here bright and early this morning.
It's hard.
And on getting your shots.
Thank you. Well, I got to tell you, Lynn, it's a little hard because my 87-year-old mother is running around the house, and there's no way that I could even complain because my mother doesn't have a complaint in her. She's adorable. But anyway, thank you.
Very good. Well, take your time. I want to ask you, you've talked about several leadership positions. Just tell us a little bit more about what your sort of leadership point of view is, and maybe even something about what you learned from early leader role models.
I think a couple things. And again, as you're hearing a theme, and it's a theme, I think, Lynn, that's the reason that I have so much admiration for you. It's one that I've learned so much. If you haven't read Lynn and Bob's book, you need to get it. It's so timely. And now there's a lot of people doing that. But when you guys wrote that, you were one of the first to really talk about that leadership style and so forth. I think it's about being authentic. It's being a servant leadership. We hear that a lot, but in practice, that is the most successful one. I think over time, what I've done is a couple things. I think number one, early on, I think I was more inclined to try to hire, people that were maybe equal to me or maybe not. I thought I might be a little bit more capable. I have learned 20 years ago, wrong answer. I like to surround myself, and I'm so honored that a number of my old employees are on this call. I just saw some of you have given me some nice comments. You guys were all smarter than me, which is why I hired you early on. I've tried to pick people that I think are more capable, smarter, that maybe what they needed from me was, again, those bowling guardrails. Maybe they needed some inspiration. They needed some encouragement. But they also needed honesty. And I think the thing that I still struggle with, because I did come from a Southern family, and my mother is an incredibly kind individual, that only in the last few years, and I'm still working on it, is, again, it doesn't do anybody any benefits to not be honest. And that's one of the things, again, it's still not, that's one of the things I'm learning even today, that I need to be more authentic about that, because it's not doing you or your subordinate or your team any favors to not be honest with them. So that's something I've learned, and I've continued to get better. But I think the thing that I'm most proud of is I think about some of my employees and some of the amazing roles that some of my great employees over the last 20 years have gone on, and they're executives and in some cases CEOs of other companies. And I feel so honored and proud that I maybe had a little tiny bit of an impact, or a little bit, maybe one little kernel, one little nugget of guidance I gave them maybe helped them. And so that's the thing that it's, I think, easy to look back and say, wow, how fun, how exciting, how powerful that I may have had a little impact on some of these great leaders.
That's fabulous. Wonderful. Do you have any additional advice? Or you've talked about the tendency of women to have a bit of the imposter syndrome, to not push hard enough, probably not risk enough. Do you have any other advice, particularly for women leaders, on leadership, or even balancing home and work?
I think a couple things. I think number one, and I think it's even harder today because there's so many books and articles and storytelling about it. But I think that you need to dig deep and be, and I hate this word, but I love this word. You need to be authentic. What is it about me? And I needed to realize early on that here's some things I'm really good at. Let's play to those. And here's some things I'm really not. Let's make sure we surround yourself with people that are really good in those. And I think too often we hear too many voices outside of us that are telling us to do this, do that. And I think one of the things I've learned early on is, and part of it's my faith, but part of it is, and part of my husband, but part of it, good advice, but go deep and say, what's the right answer? When you do that, you need to recognize that you're going to make some mistakes. And that's the other thing that, in particular, when I manage men versus women or lead men versus women, one of the things I notice is men seem to not, many times don't even, they kind of brush them off and move on. We women beat ourselves up about it for way too long. And I think somewhere between that's a real happy medium. And that's why I said from a failure perspective, and failure doesn't need to be big failure. It could be just, wow, I screwed up. Take the moment, acknowledge it, and immediately say, okay, next step, what do I do now? Put your one foot in front of the other as quickly as possible after you've kind of digested it. And that's something that I think all of us could learn, because again, you see this, situation where men and women quite often deal with it very differently. And again, for the women in the audience, it's not the end of the world. My father used to say, and again, I miss my dad. My father used to say to me all the time, what's the most they can do to you? What's the worst thing they can do to you? And you think about it, you know what? I've got my wonderful husband. I've got my beautiful daughter. I've got more friends than anybody could ever ask for. I've got my health. My mother lives with us. Life is wonderful. So what's the worst they could do to me? If you think about it that way, it's a pretty good situation.
You are so right. I know I have read that men, when a failure happens, they tend to blame other factors. Right. Women are more likely to think about what they did wrong themselves. And right. You want to assess that. I think your process is fabulous, because you're assessing that. You're trying to look for those things that you might have done, but you're not obsessing about it, and you're not blaming yourself and getting in a funk that you can't get out of. Tell us a little more now. I remember your daughter is in an entrepreneurial track, right? Just a
She
little
is.
about what you're doing now, what you spend your time on, and where your daughter, just a little bit about.
Thank you so much. So my husband and I have worked, in fact, in the same building for probably 20 of our 24 years of marriage. And we like to say sometimes he works for me, sometimes I work for him, sometimes he's a CEO, sometimes I'm the CEO. Of course, we all know that he always works for me. Just kidding. He'll tell you that though. But anyway, our daughter has just grown up interning, being part of the companies we've been involved in. And it was so heartwarming to me when she thought about it, that she said, I think I want to go into kind of an entrepreneurial company or entrepreneurial track at school. So we were very blessed. She was selected to be part of the Elon University in North Carolina, which is a really great entrepreneurial school. She got into their fellows program and she's loving it. It's been a tough year, as those of you who have children. As you all know, it's been tough because they've not been able. My daughter's is kind of separate than most of her boyfriend is at UGA, and they have a lot of, shall we say, they're pretty open outside of school hours, but in school they're always the Zoom calls. She's the opposite. They don't get any outside activity. They really have shut them down. But she's got to go to all of her classes. But it's been a great experience, and she's really learning the entrepreneurial track. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see where she ends up, but I think she feels really, she's got so many of those skills that I think would be so appropriate for a entrepreneur. She's a risk taker. She's very candid. She's a driver. She steps outside her boundaries all the time. So I'm looking forward to watching her. A quick sidebar, by the way, for the women on the phone call, I'll say this a lot. My daughter and my husband and I are very open about it. My daughter is a science baby. She's a fertility baby. And we went through a lot of help. So the one thing I tell women, and I've been an investor in a couple fertility startups that have done very, very well. You're thinking about having kids, just make sure you think about it. Don't wait and wake up when you're 50 and say, I think I want to have a kid. It may not work that way. And I hate jumping out of, this is probably not the right place to say that.
Oh, that's
I haven't
good.
talked to anybody, but again, there's this idea today that you can wake up because of science at any time and have a baby. And that may or may not be the case. And so I'm not proposing that you do or don't. I'm just saying you need to think about it. And if it's important to you, make sure that you're planning, that you're thinking about how you're going to accomplish it, because it's not as easy as when you read the tabloids about all the stars that have kids when they're 50 and 60. It's not that case, guys. So sorry.
That's important. That's important message, I think, because it is. We can easily think that there's unlimited time. And modern science can do anything.
And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just make sure that for you, you've thought about it and you're picking the right answer for you. That's all I say.
Very good. Very good. And as you were talking, I can't help but think that for somebody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, what an amazing experience to grow up with you and Rick. That was pretty incredible.
My husband and I have both been, between the two of us, I think there's probably 8 companies that we've been CEO of, and probably there's another 24 that we've been investors or mentors or board members of. So yeah, it's for the good and the bad. We've really enjoyed that part of our life.
Fabulous. Well, I feel like a lot of people know you primarily as a philanthropist for what you do globally, for your investment in micro lending, for all the things you've done around the world. Can you just tell us a little more about that and what you do, why you're so passionate about it?
Thank you. Again, I think it's because of my faith, because of my husband, because I lived around the world. My husband and I've traveled. We sometimes will pick the most obscure place to go to. One time we were in Christmas. In Borneo, which is just kind of so random. But anyway, because of all that, and because of my family situation and so forth, and because of my faith, I've always felt that to those of us, and everybody on this phone call has been given so much. To those of us who have been given, more is expected of us. And so early on, I took an active role in my giving. And I've always been generous from a financial perspective, but about 25 years ago, I became generous from a time perspective. And I've been blessed to be able to work with organizations around the world from a charity perspective. Because I'm an entrepreneur, I really like sustainable projects. There's a lot of people that want to give to crisis, and I love you. Thank you for doing that. But my husband and I is really about sustainability. And we found before micro lending became really vogue back 25 years ago, we started realizing the value of micro lending. I was able to meet Mohammed Yunus many, many years ago. And yeah, probably almost 30 years ago. And I became just so infatuated. Some of you know Vicky Escara. She was the president, CEO of Opportunity International. She was one of the highest ranking women at Delta for many years. She asked me to join her board at Opportunity, which is the world's largest faith-based micro lending organization. And so what we did, and I encourage you, what we found out is by women typically in the developing world often don't have the opportunities that we have in other, like in America and so forth. And we found that when you can help a woman, you're not only helping her and her family, but you're helping the community. And so one of the things that I was actively involved with literally 20, 25 years ago was working with women, both from providing loans, but more importantly, providing training and support. So one of the early concepts of micro lending is this whole trust group. And again, by the way, as a Atlanta entrepreneur, female entrepreneur, I've got that trust group because I've got my girlfriends who have been successful entrepreneurs for the last 20 years who are part of my circle. So it's just taking that concept and taking it to a small village in Tanzania, for example. And by providing them with loans and training, what you find out is when you give a woman a loan or loan a woman $1, what she does is she most probably is going to earn it back. And in fact, Opportunity International for the longest time had a 98% payback rate, one of the highest repayment rates around the world. And what we found out is that these women were paying back, and what were they doing? They were helping other women, they were giving their children protein, and they were paying for education. So what do you end up doing? The community is uplifted. And there's nothing, again, we also give loans to men. So this is not a sexist issue, but again and again, what I found out that the least of the lost in many cases are women. And if you can provide them with, again, not a handout, but a hand up, be side by side with them and help lift them, it's just, you can see whole communities change. And it's just been, I work and my husband works to be able to do that. That's what gives us joy. And I've seen villages that we've been going to for 20 years around the world. And I just continue, it brings tears to my eyes when I think they're on a second or third generation of entrepreneurs that community has got. One of the places we've been helping for 20 some odd years, they now have 3 libraries with books. So, you know, what an experience is that to go back, and before they didn't even have schools. And now we've got this amazing whole school system and 3 libraries. What a amazing, by the way, the community built it. This is not Westerners swooping in and building.
Right.
We came side by side and worked together. And it just, you can see my eyes tear up. It's just, wow.
That's a wonderful story.
Thank you.
I know I've heard you say as well that, and I can't remember how you said it, but we should all think of ourselves at whatever stage we are in life. We think about what we can give, because all of us on this call, all of us basically in this country are so much more blessed than people around the world.
So that's the other thing, just a real quick sidebar, and I know we're wrapping up our time, but that's the other thing that I would say is so often, and I think, I don't think it's just related to women. I think so often young people think, I've got to wait till I get so much money. I got to buy the house. I got to do this. I'll do that in the future. And the thing that I would encourage all of us to do, every one of us, again, as Lynn said, is we're so blessed here in Atlanta, Georgia. Take this time and think, who can you help? Who can you reach out? And I'm telling you, not only will that make a better world, but I'm telling you, it brings so much joy to my husband and I think about, again, the impact. I cannot stress enough. Don't wait till you're, 60 or 70 or 80 to start giving back. You might not be able to give back a lot of money, but all of us can go out there and help our neighbor, help, a local community food bank, whatever it is, I strongly encourage you. And I'll just say one thing, I think we were going to hold it, but I'm going to say it again. It's something Winston Churchill said that I just am such a big believer. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And I think that is, that's again, what gives my husband and I so much joy, is being able to truly be part of people's lives and help them. I would say help them, be side by side with them and encourage and help lift them.
That's fabulous. And we're going to ask you at the end to say a final something. And I'm going to ask you to repeat that.
I will do that again.
At least that. But it has been such a joy to talk to you. I could continue this for another 2 hours, but I know our time is wrapping up, and I'm going to turn it over to Ann to see if there are questions that we have. Do we have some questions for Karen?
Yes, Lynn, we do. Yeah, the chat room is very active. A lot of lessons being learned and a lot of appreciation for those lessons. So thank you, Karen. One of the first question came from our own Susan Hitchcock. So I'm glad to hear from her. And it may have been responded to early on, but where did your confidence from the beginning really come from?
It's a great question. And I think too often we think if all we do is encourage, and that is a big part of it. I have been surrounded by incredibly supportive parents and friends. But I think the other thing is failure. When you fail and you realize it's not, again, we said this earlier, what's the worst they can do to you? When you fail and you get back up, that gives you a sense of confidence and a strength that if all my parents did was encourage me and say, we love you, we love you, we love you, you're wonderful, I would not have been the person I am today. When I failed, my parents, said, Karen, you screwed up on that one. I had to learn that. And I had to really, it's kind of like a muscle. If you continue to work it, you get stronger. And for me, the muscle was not only the praise and the accolades and the encouragement and the just unconditional love, but equally important was oh, wow, I screwed up. I need to do better. So I think that's what really gave me the confidence over these last, many, many years.
Yeah, and your point about sports and girls and being on teams is so important because when you're in the middle of a game, you lose the ball or you do something else that is a mistake. You don't have time to process it. You just have to keep on moving on. And so it really teaches a different set of behaviors around what you do with mistakes and so on. And of course, it's proven to increase confidence in girls. The next question comes this way. I love your acknowledgement that big companies invested in training in the past. Your story about AT&T, for example. Do you see that same type of investment in training and development today? And if not, why?
So that's a great question. And I've not been I've been a startup CEO for literally 28 years now. So don't have as much experience, but I really mean that when I say that. The training that I received from my couple large corporations that I worked for, AT&T and obviously the May Company and NBC, is part of what made me successful because I learned so many valuable skills. I think there's two things. I think number one is it's hard to get the training you get from organizations like TurkNet. It's hard to get that training on your own these days. And I think there's some so valuable about that. And so I encourage, again, all the folks that are involved in companies, make sure you're investing in your people. That's a way you show them you're investing in them. Saying that, I think there has been some changes, and now there's so much available on whether it's YouTube or on the internet or networking groups. Again, when I first became a CEO, first of all, I think there's one other female CEO in town when I first became a CEO. But over the years, there's now hundreds of you all out there, and there's a network of us. And so again, please, I encourage you guys, take value and recognize what actual training can provide to you and your organization, but at the same time, avail yourselves of the networking, the community out there. And also there's so much available online.
Great point. And thank you for the plug.
I really mean that, by the way.
Great. Another question from our Susan Hitchcock. What would your daughter say she had learned from her mother of power?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think she would learn kindness. I think she said it a couple times, and she said, Mom, she said, I just love the way you're kind to a lot of people. And in this world, you know, the social media, I'm not sure I could have grown up as my daughter has because of the social media. There, again, talk about those voices. There's so many negative voices. And I think that kindness is something that, especially in this divisive world that we live in, I think kindness is one. I think the other thing she would learn is the risk taking. I think she would feel more comfortable. I would feel comfortable leaving I mean, if my daughter got stuck in, you know, you pick the country, I would be a little worried, but I would feel very confident because she's got so much, she's so independent and she's so resourceful. And I think she learned that from her dad, Rick and I. And I think that those would probably be the couple things that she would learn is the kindness, the resourcefulness, the independence, but at the same time, accountability. You know, we were not the one that when she had a bad grade, we did not go to the school and yell. We said, Alex, what should you have done? What did you not do? And I think, again, whether you call them helicopter parents or whatever, we were not those parents. And I think because of that, most of my friends who've known her for the years will say that she is, in many cases, more mature than, you know, their, 30-year-olds because she's just always been independent. And always been, again, quite resourceful.
Yeah. What gifts, man. That's fantastic. The next question is, tell us a little bit about OnGIF.
Thank you so much. Again, OnGIF is the 5 letters of longevity. My brother was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a pretty rare brain cancer, about 1.5 years ago. I have been blessed with health. We did not really have much in health. So I knew that there were problems with the healthcare system, but I really didn't know how bad they were until my brother was diagnosed. I found the original founder of the company actually pitched my husband. My husband said, you know what, my wife, I think would be more interested in this. Why don't we sit down? So we sat down and the gentleman, David, said, Karen, I'd love for you to be involved. So Rick and I Typical Entrepreneurs wrote the first check. I think it may have even been a blank check because we really believed in what he was doing. Fast forward, I took over the company for some reasons, for some family reasons with the founder and who's still a big shareholder. And I early on, Charlie Paparelli gave me some good advice. He said, Karen, at your stage, I'm not sure that you really want to be another CEO. You've done that. You've been there. You've done that. You've succeeded at that. This is an opportunity for you to maybe give back in a different way. Maybe you could be more of a mentor. And I think you could have more influence as maybe taking on a chairman role. So I took that to heart. And I am honored and thrilled that I was able to get an amazing woman as our CEO, Sharon Byers, who I think may be on the call. One of the highest ranking women at Coca-Cola. Then she ran the marketing and revenue arms for the American Cancer Society. And it always had a passion about healthcare as well. So when I sat down, we had a networking lunch. She did, Lynn, back to your comment earlier, she didn't know I was selling her. She thought we were just having a nice little lunch. And at the end of the conversation, I said, Sharon, you don't need to go back in the corporate world. You need to come run this company. You're an amazing CEO. You've done a great career, but you need to, this is your chance to really impact what we call the sick care system. We don't have a healthcare, we have a sick care system. And so Sharon joined the company last June. We did one unbelievable MVP last year. We are rolling it out in a big way in January. And essentially what it does is it gives you control of your healthcare journey. So we start by giving you all your health records. So it could be, you have your dermatologist and your OBGYN and your GP and I just had my knee replaced, my knee surgeon. All of them will be on one timeline. And so for the first time, you really have a beautiful story of your health journey. We then provide you with curated content, provide you access to clinical trials. As you may or may not know, there's over 300,000 clinical trials. Less than 4% of sick people are in a clinical trial, and yet it's been proven that most clinical trials will prolong your life. So the second thing we do is match you up. And again, we've gotten great response. We're selling it. We pivoted. Another thing you learn as an entrepreneur is lots of pivoting. We pivoted from a B2B, from a B2C, where we were selling directly to consumers, to now it's a very much we sell to employers. And I would love to, anybody's interested, we'd love to sign you up. It's always free to the consumer. Love to have you, but I think you're going to see people truly own telehealthcare, own that journey. And in this day and age, you have to be the one. You need to be the one that manages. You don't leave it to your doctor, your doctors, they don't talk to each other. You need to own your health journey. And Anjev just provides you the ability to do that. So welcome. We'd love to have any of you, and we'd love to get your feedback as well.
Anjev.
Anjev. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Fantastic. You know what? It seems to me, Karen, that every venture that you get involved with, every investment that you make is very much aligned with your sense of values and your particular values. How important is it to have that sense of values to make your decisions?
That's a great question, Ann. It really is. And, I've never really thought about it that way, but you're exactly correct. And I think as I've gotten older, my husband and I become more and more clear about who we are as individuals, who we are as a couple. As I said before, we are Jesus followers, and not to get religious on you all, but we are Jesus followers. That's important to us. But equally important, again, I truly believe we were put on this earth to give back. And I think that having those values, there's a lot of things we could do that might make money, but for us it's important that that's aligned with what we believe in. And again, it's a believe in how can we take empowerment? How can we take responsibility, accountability? How can we better manage our healthcare? How can we better manage our fertility? How can we better manage, again, our economic development in the developing world? Those are things that are so important to my husband and I, and you can see that's where our money goes. One that I believe, trying to think of, Nancy Cranford got me involved with about a year and 2 years ago, I guess it was, about the Veterans Empowerment Organization. And realizing our vets, and my husband is a retired Marine Corps officer, and realizing what our vets have to go through when they come back. And I thought, wow, typically we've invested both our time and money in overseas because your impact can be so much greater. But that's one we've just embraced because it's so important to give back to the folks that have sacrificed so much for our country. That's an example of one that just hit home with us. And I think it was exemplified by the fact that my husband was a retired Marine Corps, and he had seen so many people that had really had some tough challenges.
Yes. Yeah. That's another whole part of our population that unfortunately is falling through the cracks. So thank you to Nancy. In fact, she's entered a question as well, which is, when looking for investment dollars, any other tips you've learned other than solving their problems, especially for females?
Great question. I think, again, it's such a different environment than it was when I first raised my first dollar. And Lynn knows this. When we first raised our first dollar, I don't think any woman had raised any other than a couple $100,000. So when I first raised, tens of millions of dollars, it was pretty surprising. I think a couple things. I think number one is, how do you solve their problem? I think the second thing is you have to have a clear value proposition, because investors invest in companies for two reasons. One of them is because they want a great return. And so you need to show them that you've got a value proposition that they can get a return, and hopefully a good return on their money. I like to say that if you would have done one investment with me, you may not be ahead. But if you've done the Karen portfolio, you will be way up. And that's what I like to say. But that's the show of value proposition. I think the other thing is, surround yourself with great people. Having Sharon, having Mark Goldman, having Matt Bowers, having Doug Schultz, having this team around us has been so amazing. And I think people invest, there's an old saying in venture capital that you invest in the jockey, not the horse, or not the race. And again, any day of the week, I will put money into a well-run or a great founder or a great CEO than a great idea. Great ideas, again, if you've got a great idea, there's a high probability that 700 people across the country have that same exact idea. Mm-hmm. What they don't have is Sharon. What they don't have is my team. That's what people invested. I think the last thing is, there are people that invest. Again, I have made investments in companies that even though I didn't think they were going to be successful, I made that investment because, particularly it's women, that woman needed that opportunity. So even though the idea of the company was so-so, and even though I wasn't sure that CEO was ready, I made that investment because that's another way of giving back. I said, you know what? If I can support this woman, this might not be your key, but the next one, she's going to change the world. And so that's the other reason. And I think women probably make more of those investments, but I know a number of men, Charlie Paparoli, for example, some of you know him. I know has done that multiple times. He's invested in a person. Even if the idea wasn't good, he knows that over time that executive is really going to shine.
Yes, yes. Great advice. And so we have time to just one more question, and that is from Ashish Thakur, and I hope I pronounced the last name correctly. But Karen, who are your mentors and how do you choose them?
What a great question. And Ashish, you know me too well. You know that I could spend hours talking about the people that have invested in my life and me. I think it starts with my husband. My husband, we are so blessed that we are both CEOs. I'm not kidding when I said there's been times when we first got married, I was a CEO of a company, he was our CTO, and he had come from being a CEO of a bigger company. There are other times I've worked for him. And we've really have this candor and this ability to be mentors to each other. So that's first and foremost. But I could go on and on with the people that have impacted me. And I probably am not going to do that because I'm sure I'll remember tomorrow the 5 other people that I forgot. Suffice to say that Atlanta is a great community for giving back in terms of investing in people. For women, you guys, we've had a strong women's network, and now there's multiple for 20 some odd years. If you want help, if you want advice, there are so many women's groups that you can be involved with. And I could, again, go on and on of the people that have really put energy into my life. And again, it's my responsibility is to put that same energy into the people that I come in contact with on a daily basis. Sorry, Ashish, I know that's not the answer that you were looking for, but I could spend hours talking through who all those people were.
Oh, my Karen, this has been more than we could have ever asked for or dreamt of. So thank you so much. Now, listeners, Karen's not finished yet, but I did want to bring to your attention some of the things that are coming up at the TurkNet Leadership Group. So is looking for a slide. There we go. There we go. All right, so first of all, this is exciting. We are in Women in Leadership session number 214. Every consecutive month, we have held a Women in Leadership seminar series. So, and that's of course, thanks to Susan Hitchcock, the founder of Women in Leadership, who just recently left to go into 100% flexibility. So these are some of the nonprofits and charities that Karen actively supports. And so if you would like to be a participant in any of these, please take note. We'll also have those, I believe we'll have those in the chat room, and so that you'll have access to those websites. We also want to bring your attention to the fact that we have a brand new website at TurkNet, a whole new look. And so if you're interested to know anything more about what's going on at Women in Leadership, we have a whole new podcast series coming out. Go ahead and head on over to the turknet.com website, click on the menu, look at Women in Leadership, and you'll see all that's coming up. Our next Women in Leadership will feature as a guest Adisha Barnett, who is the Chief Brand and Communication Officer, Head of Diversity and Inclusion, and Choose Atlanta for the Metro Atlanta Chamber. And so Dr. Patricia is going to be will help facilitate that as my co-host. And so please stay tuned for that. And then we also are offering our second cohort for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coaching Certification Program. And that's going to begin on May 25th of next, well, let's see, in 2 more months. So please reach out to Tino, our CEO and president. You'll see his contact information there at the bottom of the slide. Please reach out if you're interested. This is a great way to build a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization or within your teams, or have the skills that you need to help organizations become more diverse, more embracive of equity and inclusion. Which, by the way, reminds me, Karen, of your description of your father walking you down to homecoming queen to the court and saying to you, congratulations for being such an appreciator of people from every part of your school. And so that's a great definition of inclusion.
Thank you.
So stay connected. We would invite any of you to please stay connected to us either through the website, Twitter, LinkedIn. We have a Facebook group, and of course on YouTube, where we feature many of our recordings. So please check out and subscribe to our newsletter, and here's our contact information. Stay in touch. So with that, I want to turn it right back over to Lynn. And again, I just want to thank all of our listeners for staying in with us and getting up early and being here and staying engaged. Very engaged and active group. So thank you so much. Lynn?
This has been so wonderful, Karen. Thank you, Anne. Anne was up at 2 a.m. in the basement with the tornado warnings last night. And Karen has just had a wonderful morning for us after having her second COVID shot. So it has been a joy to speak to you this morning. Karen, you have so much wisdom for us. And I just want to ask you to give us your close. What words of wisdom would you have for everybody? And I hope you'll repeat the Winston Churchill.
I will do that. Lynn, it's always so much fun. I always feel like you and I are sitting across a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and we've been friends for years, and it's just so, thank you again for inviting me. Thank you. I encourage and appreciate all the folks on this call because, again, it means a lot to me, but I think more importantly, it shows that we're all interested in learning more and kind of broadening our expanse and so forth. Thank you for all you're doing. Again, if you haven't gotten their book, I encourage you to, because it's great it's timeless about the things as good leaders we need to do. I want to thank everybody who joined us on the call today. I'm more than happy. And if you want to, Catherine, if you want to put up my email, I'm more than happy for you to put that up, K Robinson at, let me go ahead and use my private one, K Robinson at Mara, MARA6.com, K Robinson at Mara6, MARA, the number 6.com. If you want to go ahead and put that up, I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. Like you, I'm very excited to get back in the world and start to travel. We were able to do that last week, but my husband and I have got many countries that we want to get off that bucket list. I think the couple last comments I would make is, number one is we've been given so much. And I encourage all of us to kind of dig deep and say, how can I impact? What can I do? It's easy to say I don't like this person, I don't like this policy, and I don't like this politician, and I don't like this, and that's an easy thing to say, and we're bombarded in that with social media today. Take some time to turn that off and think about what can I do to really have an impact on and maybe the elderly person down the street, and maybe carrying the groceries out. It may be as simple as smiling. I don't know what it could be, but dig down and try to find something that we can all give back on a daily basis. And again, we don't need to wait till we're made it, till we're rich, till we're whatever, famous. All of us can do something today. So that's my challenge to you. I've been so blessed in so many ways that to me, it's a joy to be able to, I'm so thankful that I have a little bit of opportunity to be able to give back. As I said earlier, I'm a big believer. I've used this many times, but we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And I think that if you liked what I said today, if it resonated with you, it's because the life that my husband and I have made, our family, our community, our friends, is because of the things that we've been able to give. And that's giving to young women, it's mentoring, it could be in Tanzania, it could be in Guatemala, it could be in India. or it could be across the street. So I encourage all of us to dig deep and figure out how we can do that. And remember, that's the life that we want to be remembered for, is what we give, not how much we earned or the title we had at our company or whatever else it would be. So Lynn, I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure. I can't wait till you and I get together and drink that little glass of wine.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you all. Again, I'm more than happy to help. If I can provide any guidance or anything, I'm more than happy to help. Thanks. It's so good to see a lot of you on the call. I've seen some of the chats. But again, thanks you all. And we're going to get through this. We're just going to continue to power through it, and all good.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thanks for everybody who's been here. Have a great day and a great weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye now.